Sons of the Straw Man! You know, for ninjas, you guys spend an awful lot of time in daylight. Yeah. Anti-metal. Now, we finish this. James asks, what's your take on the use of moral choice systems in games, such as those made by BioWare? I think moral choice will be an interesting thing at some point, but right now it's basically just a gimmick. Doing the same statistically determined multiple ending stuff games have been capable of since the beginning of the medium, but with an extremely binary black and white understanding of good or bad as pretentious gloss, ain't cutting it. You know what might be a more interesting application of this concept? Programming enemies and NPCs to treat the player's actions as moral choices and alter their behavior accordingly. Like, if you were playing a shooter and you mainly shot to wound or didn't kill the defenseless, your enemies would start learning that you're not a monster and eventually be more apt to stand down or even surrender. Or on the flip side, if you did choose to play through as though you were Jason Voorhees, some enemies would be afraid and run away, but would also be more apt to fight like their lives depended on it if cornered. I don't know if it's possible with real-time calculation speeds at this point, but it'd be worth trying. Andrew Northcutt wants to know if a video game culture-centered television network is a viable idea at all. No. Look, I shit on G4 because I'm lazy and it's easy, but honestly I think a video game channel doesn't make any sense in today's market. The fact is, the stuff you might watch a game channel for, tips, hints, commentary, etc., is all covered much better to a much broader degree than TV could manage on the web, ditto gaming news. Look what happened to cable news. Because news addicts pretty much have the internet now, cable news channels went from being 24-hour broadcasts to 24 hours of rotating opinion shows with a ticker running underneath because no one checks those channels for news anymore. They Google it. A gaming-centric channel like G4 might have worked in the 80s and 90s, might, but today, there's just no point in it. Gearsting wants to know, is it unfair for new IPs to have to compete with classics that have an undying fanbase made in a time when the people making new IPs were children? Yeah, it's unfair. It's incredibly unfair, but it's also the way things work. I mean, this literally tops the list on the not gonna change roster, so yeah, it's unfair, but what are you gonna do? Cass asks, do you think gaming popularity has reached the point where there aren't any particular stigmas or stereotypes attached to being a gamer, or is there still some prejudice going on? There's always stereotypes and prejudice in regard to any kind of subculture. The issue in this case is that the mainstream culture's image of the stereotypical gamer has changed from developmentally arrested asexual introvert to aggressively overcompensating beta male douchebag. I'm not sure that's an improvement. 75% G wonders, what techniques for making your several video series do you feel you've needed most? Sound. You must have good sound. People will put up with bad effects, bad editing, sketchy writing, etc., but if it's a chore to listen to, it's just not going to cut it. Making your sound good should be a top priority, even though it's one of the unsexy things that nobody really thinks about when getting into DIY video production. Metagrave asks, which video game character who has played a supporting antagonist role in a video game do you think is deserving of his or her own title? Toad. Toad absolutely should have starred in his own full-on action game by now, and if it was up to me, it'd be built around the Doki Doki Panic Mario 2 Applejack playstyle. It can work. I to None, which is apparently pronounced Second Coming, asks, why did you give your fans the finger? For legal purposes, pursuant to the settlement disclosure laws of the state of Nevada, I am unable to comment upon anything that may or may not have transpired between myself and Ms. You mean like the gesture the finger. Oh, okay. Well, frankly, I didn't mean it as giving the finger, or any other appendage for that matter, to anybody. What I simply meant was that the Game OverThinker remains the show over which I have the most editorial control personally. So if I have any kind of crazy experimental ideas or a new way of doing things, I'm probably going to try it out here first. For example, I'm thinking of giving the Gee Whiz crew their own spin-off, and since it's game-related and fits, I figured I'd give them a try on the Game OverThinker first, so we'll see how that goes. Didn't mean any disrespect, it's just a matter of this show I have more freedom on, so I'm going to act like a show with more freedom. Goran Isaacson queries, what are your thoughts on QuickTime events? Hate 'em. Fucking hate 'em. If you're gonna have a cutscene, have a cutscene. Don't throw some push X to dodge bullshit in there and then tell me the cutscene is now gameplay. Giassi Inteus asks, how do you feel about some of your fans' reactions to the new direction of the show? Well, obviously I'm happier to get positive feedback than negative feedback, but really it doesn't bother me. The thing is, I feel like the notion that this show was always universally beloved until it started to have kind of a storyline and skits going on is a little bit misleading. The fact is, this was always by design a very divisive, polarizing, love it or hate it kind of show. And looking back on it, things like Building a Better Gamer, Heavens to Metroid, and episodes like that, Worst Person, another one, probably got a lot more negative feedback overall than the Entitlement ever did. That said, the second I stop following my gut and just, start putting my finger in the wind and asking, oh, what can I do to make people love me this week? That's when this show is seriously going to start to suck ass. Because I can't promise that everyone will like everything we do episode to episode, but what I can promise is no one is going to like the pandering, sycophant, love me version. Jacob wants to know, can a game be perfect? Yup. Mario Man 64 asks, what are your personal opinions on expansion packs and DLC? DLC and expansion packs should be used for extra content and bonus content. I don't mind if the base code for certain downloadable extras are already on the disc for speed's sake, but things you need to get 100% completion or to finish the story should not be withheld for DLC. Oh, and it really should not be used as a way to fuck over the people who buy the game used. Seriously, anyone in the games industry who's pulling that, go fuck yourselves on that one. You two have fought bravely. Done your ancestors proud. We're of a kind, you and I. In another life, we might have left here with a camaraderie forged on the field of battle. Unfortunately, you burned down the Sharkade. Brooke wants to know, since he's made of straw, how does PyroThinker not set himself on fire? Magic.
What the hell is that?
Some kind of jewel. Seems to be all that's left of him.
Huh. A stone charged with elemental magic would explain his fire powers, and how he didn't burn himself up with them. Think the other guy's got a blue one?
Cathartic Cat asks, Are there any episode topics that you would have done differently if you were to do them now, whether due to new information or a change in your own thinking? Okay, I don't want to tip my hand too much on this one because I might actually end up doing it, but I always kind of thought that episode 6, Prawn, was overall a pretty good episode that I stand by its thesis, but I think I kind of only got about halfway to where the point should be, and then kind of trailed off on a jokey, somewhat self-serving end that really was not the best place to stop, so I might go back to that one. Sabira Ibn Rashid asks, what are your opinions on the representation of Islam and Muslims in video games? That there isn't enough representation to begin with, and that what representation there is basically sucks. Muslim persons, Islamic culture, and even Middle Eastern culture in general exist in modern video games principally as either villains, implications of villainy, or they don't exist at all. This is shameful, disgraceful, and will be remembered as one of the medium's great failings at this point in its history. Now granted, video games up to this point haven't done a good job depicting any religion other than maybe Christianity, Shintoism, and maybe Buddhism, but given that so many modern video games are taking place in parts of the world and or historical periods where Islam is such a huge influence, it really seems like a huge oversight that this isn't being dealt with better. Manic Mailman asks, what do you think of difficulty in games today? Well, I think gamers of my generation overrate the insane difficulty levels of NES-era games, first off, since they were made in a time where being ridiculously hard was the only way to make a game last long, and while things are a little too easy overall today, there has to be a happy medium between that and, say, Dark Souls. I'm also a fan of the Kirby formula, where it's easy to simply beat the game, but somewhat difficult to master it. In fact, if I had to summarize my philosophy on the matter, it'd be this. A video game should be easy to play, challenging but possible to finish, but very difficult to complete. Zarathzul asks, think we'll ever see Nintendo get out of the hardware market in our lifetime? Yes, I do. But mostly because I think we'll see everyone get out of the hardware market in our lifetime. The one console or even no console future is coming. The only question is whether or not it gets here before or after the digital-only distribution gets here. I genuinely believe, looking at the current pace of technology, that within the next 2 decades you're going to see video games be just another function of some kind of all-media player device that also plays movies and music hooked up to your TVs, that all electronics manufacturers will make them, and that all remaining game companies will become publisher, developer-only studios making games for all platforms. And yeah, it'll be kinda depressing to see that era of gaming pass, but so long as Nintendo takes better care of their IPs as a third party than some other one-time console giants did, I'll survive. Subtle asks, what are your thoughts on the set price of new AAA titles? Retail video game pricing is unbelievable bullshit, and it's fucking ridiculous that we let the industry get away with this. Yes, we all know that it's hard to quantify the relative work of a creative project, but we also know that most games are not worth paying the full $59.99 for. You know what else we also all know, even though no one could ever prove it? That the reason this asinine pricing structure still stands is that the whole industry, from publishers to designers to manufacturers, has basically agreed, maybe officially, maybe not, to hold steady on it so the whole house of cards doesn't fall down on them. Folks, that's not an industry. That's what you call a cartel. John Kennan asks, what do you think of so-called gamer entitlement? An undue feeling of entitlement is behind pretty much everything wrong with gamer culture today, and I think it has a lot to do with too many gamers' inability to see outside their own experience on a given subject. The thing is, games are great, games are wonderful, games are meaningful, and so on, but playing games is a hobby, and often a pretty expensive one, and I think too many of us, myself definitely included, forget that, because being a devoted gamer pretty much means by default that you've already got to be a person with enough available money to afford at least one console costing several $100 and $60 more for each new game. A lot of us don't take into account how fortunate we are to already have said money in the first place. Bottom line, a gamer who really truly understands how lucky he or she is to be able to play any games at all is a gamer who will be less likely to get all pissy when Diablo doesn't use their preferred color palette. We need more of those. Point P asks, do you think there's going to be a third nation or region in the video game realm that can make as much cultural impact as Japan and the US? Boy, I'm glad somebody asked this one. I honestly think it might end up being Latin America. I know there's a tendency with tech jobs to always look toward the booms happening in South Korea and India, but honestly, South Korea and India have gaming preferences demographically that don't necessarily translate to Japan or the United States / Western Europe, which are the big gaming markets, so that puts some of their game design graduates at a competitive disadvantage. Latin America's gaming trends tend to run pretty parallel to the United States and Western Europe, which are the biggest markets for video games right now, so their game design grads are going to come out raring and ready to go in the biggest market, and that's really going to count for something. So I would definitely be keeping an eye on the Latin American gaming scene. No one is talking about it, but I think it's going to be a major player going forward. Matt B. asks, how is Super Mario Bros. 3 the greatest achievement in video game history? Well, Matt, I don't necessarily know that it is, just that it's always felt like that to me, and I don't think it's just the nostalgia talking. For me, Mario 3 was the NES and Miyamoto's team firing on all cylinders. Super Mario World, while excellent in its own right, came out right at the start of the SNES and was bumping up against its own limitations, which is often the case for flagship games. But Mario 3, it was really one of the first times we saw a top-tier title operating with breathing room. So many levels, so many different enemies, the creative we'll do it because we can energy is astonishing in such an early title. I mean, they had power-ups that only existed to be rare and cool-looking, or only for one level. That was unheard of at the time.
Not so fast, Chilly Willy.
Jared asks, what do you think is the best method of storytelling in video games? There is no right way or wrong way. If a story is told well, it's going to transcend whatever medium it's told through, whether it's cutscenes, gameplay, dialogue trees, on-screen text, whatever it is. If you tell a good story, no one is going to notice what the medium is. Cutscenes get a bad reputation, not because it's a bad way to relay information, but because it's usually badly done. A good cutscene will work just like a good dialogue bubble will work. Gaming does not have a problem trying to find the right medium to tell the story through. Gaming has a problem finding good stories to tell.
Well, gang, that's enough letters for one show. Congratulations to everyone who made the cut, and if yours didn't, don't feel bad. We've got hundreds of great questions, and it doesn't necessarily mean that yours wasn't good or won't get answered in a later show. In any case, thanks for writing in. Now, let's watch and see if the Overthinker finishes off the blue guy.
Don't say it, 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 don't say it.
There can be only one.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Huh. Yep, he had a blue one. So, threat neutralized, Sharkade avenged, Ninja's dead. Guess that means we're back to business as usual, right, sir? Or we could immediately start trying to find out where these mysterious magic gems came from. That works too.